Hey everyone! Today, we're tackling a problem that probably keeps a lot of network admins up at night. Getting your on-premise networks and the cloud to actually talk to each other, especially when it comes to DNS. We're going to break down an Azure service that's designed to finally tame that hybrid cloud complexity.
So let's just dive right in. If you've ever tried to get your on-prem network and your Azure resources to resolve names seamlessly, you know the pain. It can feel like you're wrestling with this tangled mess of custom virtual machines, super complex configurations, and just constant firefighting. But what if it didn't have to be like that?
Before we get to the shiny new solution, let's really sit with the problem for a minute. Why has this been so hard for so long? We've got to look at the traditional approach and all the challenges that come right along with it. I bet these points on this slide look painfully familiar to a lot of you. For years, the only real answer was to just spin up your own DNS server on a VM. And suddenly, you're on the hook for everything. We're talking constant OS patching, software updates, all that fun stuff. You end up with these fragile, custom-built configurations that don't really integrate with the cloud natively. And that, of course, brings up security worries and means you have to build out your own high availability. It all just adds up to a massive operational headache.
Okay, but what if you could just offload all of that pain? Well, that's exactly where a cloud-native, managed solution completely changes the game. So let's meet the Azure DNS Private Resolver.
So what is this thing exactly? Well, the most important thing to know is that it's a fully managed platform service. Its entire reason for being is to bridge that DNS gap between Azure and your on-prem networks, and to do it securely and seamlessly. And really, the best part? It does it all without you having to deploy, manage, or patch a single custom DNS server.
This slide really says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the old way. You're the one patching, maintaining, and trying to bolt on high availability. It's expensive, and it's a huge time sink. But then you look to the right. With the Private Resolver, and Azure is managing everything. High availability, it's just built in. And according to Microsoft, this all comes at a fraction of the cost of a traditional infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, setup. All right, so we've covered the what and the why. Now for the fun part. Let's pop the hood and see how this thing actually works. We're going to break down its key components to really understand the magic.
First up, we have the inbound endpoint. The easiest way to think of this is like the ear of the resolver, and it lives right inside your Azure virtual network. It gets its own private IP address from your VNet, and its only job is to listen for DNS queries coming from your on-prem network into Azure. So when a server in your data center needs to find an Azure VM, you just tell your on-prem DNS to forward the request right here.
And on the flip side, of course, we have the outbound endpoint. If the inbound endpoint is the ear, well, this is the mouth. It's what allows your resources in Azure to send DNS queries out to your on-prem DNS servers, or maybe even to another cloud. This is all controlled by a really smart set of forwarding rules that you get to define. Let's trace a query to see how this all comes together. So, imagine a VM in Azure needs to find a server name that's on-prem. First, Azure checks its own local private DNS zones. No match? Okay. The query then gets passed to the forwarding rule set. The rule set is smart. It looks for the most specific match, like add.contoso.com, and sends the query off to the right on-prem DNS server. And if there's still no match in any of your rules, it just falls back to the public Azure DNS to figure it out. It's a really simple, logical, and super powerful flow.
Okay, the tech is cool, for sure. But how does this translate to business value? What does it actually mean for your organization? Let's talk about the tangible benefits.
Let's be real, a lot of this comes down to cost and effort, right? And this quote from Microsoft's own documentation really hits the nail on the head. Reducing your operating costs isn't just about the money. It's about reducing risk and freeing up your valuable engineering teams from doing maintenance so they can actually innovate. That's a direct boost to business agility.
And we're not talking about a small-scale solution here. This service is built for the enterprise. You can create up to 1,000 forwarding rules in a single rule set. That gives you an incredible amount of powerful, granular control over exactly how your DNS traffic gets routed, even in the most complex environments you can think of. So, let's just quickly recap the big wins here. 1, it's fully managed with high availability built right in. 2, you get secure access to your private DNS zones. 3, it's scalable and performs well under pressure. And 4, and this is a big one for a lot of you, it is totally DevOps friendly. You can automate the whole thing with tools like Terraform, ARM, or Bicep. Of course, no service is perfect, and it's super important to understand the limitations before you go all in.
So for a balanced view, let's look at some of the important restrictions you really need to consider.
This table gives us a quick look at the hard limits. You can have up to 15 resolvers per subscription, 5 inbound and 5 outbound endpoints for each of those, and like we said, 1,000 rules per rule set. Honestly, for most situations, these limits are pretty generous, but it is always critical to know the boundaries you're working with.
Now for some really critical architectural rules. These are the gotchas you absolutely need to know. The resolver and its virtual network have to be in the same Azure region. VNet encryption? Not supported. The subnets you use have to be dedicated only to the resolver, no sharing. And for right now, IPv6-enabled subnets and the high-speed Azure ExpressRoute FastPath are not compatible. You've got to plan for these.
So, after seeing how it works, what it can do, and yeah, even what it can't do, the real question is for you. Are you ready to stop babysitting DNS servers and finally simplify your hybrid network for good?
If the answer is yes, here are your next steps, pulled straight from the official docs. You can dive deeper to really understand the resolution flows, or hey, why not just jump in and get your hands dirty? There are quick start guides for both the Azure portal and for PowerShell. That's all for this one. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.